to video 2, part 2 of our series of videos on using Fluid Designer for 3D printing and talking about Nurbs Curves in Blender 2.79 and onwards. Now in the first video we showed you how you can find lots and lots of Nurbs Curves, parametric smart objects as we refer to them, in our object library. So all of these are actually Nurbs Curves, and they can just be placed on the screen and joined with other objects to make finished objects. If however you want to create your own Nurbs Curves, then you can just go to Add Curve. Now there are some here, Anipa and Pappas and Wiredish. You can load these curves from our website at fluiddesigner.co.uk, and Curves Galore you probably need to load those from the Blender menu by going to User Preferences. So I'm just going to show you how to use some of these. So if you go to Curves Galore, now our grid size here is 22mm by 22mm approximately, and there are different profiles that you can use. So if I change this to an n-sided profile, for example, so I've got an octagonal profile there, and if I just increase my radius to 10mm, you can see it takes up that whole shape. Now this is a poly. I tend not to use poly curves at all. And notice if I select Bezier, it stays as our octagonal shape, and I can have a Bezier 3D or a Bezier 2D, and there are differences between those. Now when it comes to Nurbs, we tend to use 3D curves rather than 2D, because we can place bevel objects around them to create solid objects. But notice what happens when I select this Nurbs 3D here. My octagon changes to this circular shape. Now that's what tends to happen with Nurbs. Nurbs likes everything to be smooth. You can't keep straight sections with Nurbs, so that's one of the differences between Nurbs and Bezier. Now if I wanted to make this a solid object to print it, I'd need some sort of bevel object, and we haven't got any at the moment, but we showed you in video 1. If you go to 3D templates, cross sections there in the objects library, and if you select cross section there, you can just place that object in the middle of the screen. That's 1 by 1, and so you can apply that to the curve, and as we showed you in video 1, you can change the dimensions of that, and you can see it changing in the middle of the screen there to 6mm in this case. Okay, so that's how you can add your own curves. And oh yeah, of course you can of course edit them. So if I go tab key into edit mode, you can change the shape of this, and so you can create that more heart type shape from the original. Well, it started off actually as an octagon shape. Alright, so you can edit just by moving control points in edit mode there. Now if you were to use one of these other curves here, for example Anipa curve, one of the important things to understand about this is that one of the disadvantages with Nurbs curves is that the file size, the face count can be very high. So if I go to Tools, Object Tools, and convert that to a mesh, and just look up here, notice the faces. We're at 64,000 faces on this object. So if we zoom in, you can see lots and lots of faces. Alright, one way to actually reduce that is if we go to Add Curve again and Anipa, if you change the resolution down, let's change it down to 60 for example, and go to Tools, Object Tools, and convert to a mesh, notice we've taken the faces down to 21,000. So we've got a third of the number of faces this time, and you can see that when we go into edit mode. You can of course use decimate to reduce the face count down, but that's something you do need to take into account when using Nurbs curves like this. Now another important point to understand is if I just go to I need to go to File menu. If I just go to File, and if I just open, not on Files still, am I? Whoa, come on. If I just go to File, and if I open up this recent one, another important thing to understand with these Nurbs curves is they're great for joining together. So we could join that with the A and the V as we've just shown you. They're great for joining objects together like that. They're great for embossing, in other words putting it above the surface area. So the A and the V here are above the surface area of the disk, and so if I just take this object now and just export it as an OBJ file, it will 3D print, I promise you. But what Nurbs Curves are absolutely hopeless at is engraving, in other words making a hole in the plate below this. So if you look at this object over here, alright, if I go into edit mode, these are Bezier curves, and I know they're Bezier curves because you've got these handles, so you've got a control point and you've got a couple of handles there. If we go into edit mode with the A or the V, which are Nurbs curves, notice there are no handles. There are control points but no handles. Now if I convert this to a mesh, alright, so that's my Art Deco pattern there, and if I click on the disk and go to modifier, and if I use a Boolean modifier, and if I do the difference between that and the Art Deco pattern, and then apply the modifier, and then if I move the Art Deco pattern out of the way, I've engraved it. In other words, I've made an indent into that disk. If I try and do that with the Bezier curves, it will not work. So if I convert this to a mesh, and then go to my disk again and do a modifier, not decimate, I want a Boolean modifier, and if I do the difference with the Harrington font A and apply the modifier, I don't believe it's actually done it. That does not usually work, okay? I don't know why that worked this time. That's a mystery to me, because that doesn't usually work. So let's try it without the that's absolutely unbelievable. Okay, now you see I can't do it with the curve, so if I change the V to a mesh and do the Boolean and the difference with the Harrington font V and apply the modifier, right, now that's what normally happens with Nurbs. I don't know why that worked with the A. You cannot guarantee it's going to work with Nurbs. As you can see, it did not work there, and you can frustrate yourself to death trying to get this to work. If you want to engrave, use Bezier curves, and particularly use 2D Bezier curves. I would not use Nurbs curves. You can see it worked with the A, but it didn't work when I tried to do it with the V. Okay, so Nurbs curves are really great for joining together and for embossing, for putting above objects, but they are not good for engraving like this. Alright, so that's one important thing to actually understand about Nurbs curves there, and how they can be actually used in Fluid Designer. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about in this video. Hope you found it useful.